Hi, I'm back. Only I don't know how long it's been, but it's been a few months. Um, we are reading On the Heavenly Spheres, a treatise on traditional astrology with Helena Avalar and Luis Ribeiro. And we are in, I do believe, chapter 6. And it is on essential dignities, and we're on page 71. So grab your book and read along. Here we go. How exaltation and fall are assigned. The explanation of exaltation also has agricultural logic as its basis. It is tied to the degree of fertility of a planet and its affinity with a particular season of the year. The sun is exalted in Aries because spring begins when it enters this sign, and the days begin to get longer and warmer. It is hot and dry. Its hot and dry nature is identical to that of Aries and its ruler Mars. Its fall occurs in Libra, a sign that signals the diminishing of light and the beginning of autumn. The moon is exalted in Taurus, a feminine spring sign adjacent to Aries, the sign of the sun's exaltation. As queen of the heavens, she remains positioned next to her king. Furthermore, if the sun were in Aries, the moon, when leaving its rays, would be visible for the first time in Taurus. Scorpio opposite Taurus is the sign of its fall. Oh, I haven't actually heard it explained like that before. Cool. Saturn is exalted in Libra, the sign opposite the exaltation of the sun. Libra signals the start of autumn, a season when temperatures become colder and the days decrease in length. It is thus the ideal sign for exaltation of the coldest planet, Saturn. By the same logic, its fall is in Aries, the first sign of spring. Jupiter, the planet of fertility and abundance, is exalted in Cancer, a sign of summer and the ripening of crops. Its fall is in Capricorn. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, where its extreme heat is tempered by the cold of winter, and its fall is in Cancer. Venus, a feminine moist planet, is exalted in Pisces, a sign of humidity that makes way for the fertility of spring. And its fall, is in Virgo, a sign that marks the passage into autumn and the predominance of dryness. Mercury, of a dry nature, is exalted in Virgo, a hot and dry sign, which it also rules, and its fall is in Pisces, a cold, moist sign. And now we're going to read a little chapter called The Degree of Exaltation. Traditional authors also assign specific degrees of exaltation to the exaltation of the planets. Thus, the sun has its exaltation at 19 degrees of Aries, and the moon at 3 degrees of Taurus. Jupiter at 15 Cancer, and Mercury at 15 Virgo, Saturn at 21 Libra, and Mars at 28 Capricorn, and Venus at 27 Pisces. Fall occurs in the same degree of the opposite sign. In practice, however, the exaltation is considered in the full width of the sign. These degrees appear to indicate the points of greater strength. Some researchers believe them to be symbolic positions, what remains of an astronomical system of great importance to the ancients. Ooh, okay. Secondary dignities. Rulership, exaltation, detriment, and fall are the major dignities, also called complete, of the astrological system. It is possible to perform a basic interpretation of a horoscope relying solely on the scoring of these four factors. However, the system of dignities is more complex. In addition to the rulership and exaltation, there are three other levels of dignity. We have triplicity, term, and face, also known as decan. These additional dignities, apart from having specific technical applications, allow for a better evaluation of the potential expression of every planet in the various degrees of the zodiac. By using the whole system, we can understand how, in some horoscopes, apparently debilitated planets can have an expression more consistent with their natures. One might additionally say that, in contrast to rulership and exaltation, the triplicities, term, and faces don't have a complementary debility. For this reason, they are also designated incomplete dignities. Triplicities. The triplicities are dignities assigned according to each element of each sign. 3 planets are assigned to each element, one called diurnal, another nocturnal, and the third called participating or common, also known as mixed. These 3 planets are common to the sign belonging to each element. For the fire element, the sun is in diurnal triplicity, and nocturnal triplicity is Jupiter, and Saturn is the participating triplicity. The air element has Saturn for diurnal triplicity, Mercury for the nocturnal triplicity, and Jupiter for the participating triplicity. For earth element, the diurnal triplicity is Venus, the nocturnal is the moon, and the participating is Mars. Water also has Venus as the diurnal triplicity. Mars has the nocturnal triplicity, and the moon is participating. As can be seen, the assignment of triplicities to each element follows the sect of the planets. Diurnal planets are attributed to the diurnal sect, and nocturnal planets to the nocturnal sect. So there's a little chart right here where it just basically says, shows exactly what we were reading. In practice, a planet in its triplicity is literally among family since it finds itself in the element of its own sect. It is not in its realm, as in rulership, nor is it prime minister, as in exaltation, but it is part of the royal family and therefore enjoys some power. It's the Dutch and Duchess. A planet in its own triplicity is among friends. Some authors state that in a diurnal chart, the diurnal triplicity is the strongest, and the nocturnal will have more impact in a nocturnal chart. The participating triplicity will always have a moderate strength. In any event, a planet posited in a sign in which it possesses triplicity is in a state of dignity, independent of whether the chart is diurnal or nocturnal. The rulers of the triplicities are generally considered in sequence, receiving the label of first, second, and third triplicity. This sequence depends on whether the chart is diurnal or nocturnal. Recall that in the diurnal chart, the sun is above the horizon, and in nocturnal charts is below the horizon. In diurnal charts, we give precedence to the diurnal triplicity, followed by the nocturnal and the participating. In nocturnal charts, the precedence is given to the nocturnal triplicity, followed by the diurnal and the participating. In very specific interpretive techniques, see Appendix 4, additional considerations concerning the houses. The triplicities indicate temporal sequences. In these cases that It is in these cases that the diurnal and nocturnal sequences become more relevant because of the order of the planets is decisive. I'm curious if they are kind of referring to how, in a diurnal chart, the diurnal triplicity, the first one can be like the first half of life, and then the nocturnal, the second half of life, and then the participating is like the end of life, the third. I'm curious. I'm going to check it out later though. Terms or faces. The terms are divisions of the signs into 5 unequal divisions. To each part or term is assigned a rulership of one of the 5 traditional planets: Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Saturn. You know, they didn't list Mercury in there because they just listed 4. But the sun and moon do not rule the terms. But yeah, Mercury is in there too. The greatest peculiarity about the terms is irregularity. Each division consists of unequal parts of the same sign, and each sign is divided in different ways. In addition, the sequence of the rulers also differs from sign to sign. That is, no 2 signs are the same with respect to their terms. For example, in Aries, the first division has 6 degrees, the second has 6 degrees, the third has 8 degrees, and the fourth and fifth each have 5 degrees. In the following sign, Taurus, the respective divisions have 8, 6, 8, 5, and 3. Also, the sequence of planets is completely different in these signs. In Aries, the first term belongs to Jupiter, second to Venus, and the third to Mercury, and the fourth to Mars, and the last to Saturn. While to Taurus, the sequence of term rulerships is Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, Mars. The logic for these divisions has been lost in time. The most ancient authors, namely Ptolemy, suggest that the distribution depends upon the degree of the dignity that each planet has in a sign, given priority sometimes to rulership and sometimes to exaltation, sometimes to triplicity. Mars has in a sign given priority sometimes to rulership, sometimes to exaltation. Wait a minute. This is why I use this. Let's see. Mars and Saturn, because they are malefics, tend to rule over the last two terms, while the benefics, Jupiter and Venus, are given the initial terms. The terms most frequently used in this book are the Egyptian terms. This sequence appears in the works of most ancient authors and has been most consistent throughout time. The term of a planet can be compared to its fiefdom within a sign. A planet in its own term is its own private territory, even if the sign where it's located is not particularly favorable to it. It can therefore act according to its own rules, literally on its own terms. The term, oh, did I say? No, I didn't. Okay, never mind. The term also has an effect on the quality of the expression of the planets. For example, a planet in the terms of Saturn will have a more reserved expression, while a planet in the terms of Jupiter will have a more jovial expression. Some authors use the word limits, boundaries, or ends to refer to this dignity. Faces, also known as decans. The faces, or decantes, are regular 10-degree divisions of a sign, and because each sign has 30 degrees, there are 3 faces in each sign. To each face is assigned a ruling planet according to the Chaldean order. Assigned to the first face of Aries is Mars, the planet that rules Aries, followed by the face of the Sun and of Venus. The following planet in the Chaldean order is Mercury, the planet assigned to the first face of Taurus, followed by the Moon and Saturn. Jupiter, the next planet in this sequence, is assigned to the first face of Gemini, followed by Mars and the Sun. The Chaldean order continues through the zodiac. Faces are relatively weaker dignities because they only slightly reinforce the nature of the planet. Apart from being a part of a scoring system of essential dignities and abilities, they are applied in specific interpretive systems, where they serve to detail behavioral differences of the signs. From this perspective, they are used in detailed interpretations of the ascendant and the sun. There are other types of dignities that arise from divisions of the zodiac that are even smaller from the attribution of qualities to particular degrees. Since these dignities do not have such a widespread application, we will not discuss them in this chapter. Some of these systems are referred to in Appendix 3, minor dignities. I might have to get into the appendix before we keep reading. Let's see, variations on the assignment of the terms. Good. There are other variations on the sign of the terms that are worth mentioning. The most important is the table of Ptolemaic terms. This version of the terms is suggested by Ptolemy in his work Tetrabiblos, and is also mentioned in medieval sources, but its use seems to have been very sporadic. During the Renaissance, Ptolemy's work became more prevalent and his table was popularized. Nevertheless, various versions of his table were circulated with significant variations, many of them mere scribble errors. 2 versions of this table are currently in use. See Appendix 3, Minor Dignities. Ptolemy refers to an additional table which he designates as the Chaldean terms, but which is not presented in any other contemporary work. There's no known examples of this use. And then, what I was really actually excited to get to was variations on the assignment of the faces, or decans. With respect to the Western astrological tradition, there are no known variations of the assignment of the faces of the planet. Nevertheless, a variant based on the Hindu astrological decan system which is very different from the Western faces. It is currently being widely published. In the Hindu system, the distribution of planets is based upon the elements and the sign rulerships. The first decan of a sign is assigned to the ruler of that sign, the second ruler, the subsequent sign of the same element, and the third to the last sign of the same element. For example, for Capricorn, the first decan corresponds to Saturn, ruler of Capricorn. The second to Venus is the ruler of the next earth sign, Taurus, and third to Mercury, which rules Virgo, the remaining earth sign. Although interesting, the system is a part of another tradition and shouldn't be mixed with the system of the Western tradition. Its insertion into Western astrology is a consequence of a great trend of Eastern importations at the end of the 19th century and was made by authors who did not know the fundamental rules of astrology. I didn't know that. Other Deccan systems were based on mixtures or derivations of the traditional or the Hindu are often referenced in the astrological literature, but their validity and origin are questionable and will not be treated in this work. Okay, let's call that good. Page 75. Thanks.